All right, all right. Hey everybody, how's it going? Just starting the stream here now. We're gonna give everybody a couple minutes to hop in here before we start. It's going to be a short live stream today. We're going to be hanging out and watching a couple government announcements as they come out. The one that sparked my attention to start this was the NDP's plan to announce their position on COVID-19 aid, and that could mean benefits. I believe there's going to be some information here on their position on student loans, as well as Justin Trudeau and President Joe Biden sitting down to talk, or rather over Zoom. Of course, that's how they have to do it these days, about some major issues here in Canada. So we're going to sort of take a look at these topics. We're going to do some Q&A, any questions you have. There's also a lot going on right now in the markets in terms of the stock market. We saw quite a dip this morning. So if there's any questions about things related to that, we can take a look at some of that too. And we can sort of hang out and take a look at what's going on in the world for Canadians today. We're just going to give a couple more minutes here for people to get in. I'm seeing Underground P in the chat. Hey, how's it going? Good to see you in here. I'm loving it. Whenever I look over here, I'm looking at the chat that's going on during the stream. So we're going to give a couple more minutes, like I said, before we get in here. But the thing that we're going to take a look at today, like I said, is this live announcement from Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP. Now, it's interesting to get a perspective on where their party's sort of lining up with what sort of policies they want to bring in and what they're going to support in the House of Commons. Now, we know that the Liberal government just announced extensions to CRB, the CRSB, the CRCB, as well as EI. Now, the first three benefits, those are going to be able to get changed without going through the House of Commons, without there being a vote. But what's going to happen is rather soon they're going to have to vote on these changes to EI. So we could get some information about his position on that, as well as his party's position on that. So, hey, yeah, I'm seeing Sebastian in the stream from Brampton. We've got Nancy here. Good morning, Nancy. How's it going? It's nice to see you in here. I always have a lot of fun when I do these things. Okay, I'll take a quick sip of coffee and then we'll get right into this announcement from Jagmeet Singh. And I believe he's still live, so we'll try to slowly catch up to where he is right now. Okay, let's get in here. I'll switch it over so you can see what I'm looking at. And there we go. And we'll hope to get the audio levels right. But let's listen in and we'll pause it and sort of talk about what he's saying and if there's any more context that I can give you as to what this announcement really looks like and what it means.
Thank you, everybody. Merci.
Okay, I'm going to turn
today
that
I
up
want to start off by talking about the upcoming meeting with President Biden and
there we go.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Okay.
What I want to highlight is that many of the things that President Biden has committed to doing are things that we have fought for here in Canada, and Justin Trudeau's refused to do. To bring in a minimum wage of $15 an hour was something we've long called for, we've long fought for. Initially, the idea was snubbed, and now this was a commitment that the Liberals made. But as many of their commitments, they haven't followed through. President Biden's already indicated he's going to increase the minimum wage. We know that the moratorium for students, this is vital. Students cannot find jobs, that they are one of the hardest hit. We've seen from report after report, the jobs reports indicates that young people have been disproportionately impacted, as well as racialized people and women. So one of the things that young people are asking for, students are asking for, is a moratorium on paying back student loans. At the federal level, this has to happen. We've called for it. A motion was passed in Parliament. President Biden looks like he's about to do it. Justin Trudeau needs to follow suit.
That's interesting.
For the vaccination,
let me pause that here.
President Biden has.
Okay, so he's talked about two things so far, and he's sort of relating this to what's going on in America right now, right? We're seeing Joe Biden come in. He's making a lot of changes to the policies that are going on in America. Now, what Jagmeet's doing is he's taking this opportunity to say, hey, look at this president that's coming in. Traditionally, we as Canadians like to feel like we're ahead of where Americans are in terms of our policies and what we do for supports for Canadians. And Jagmeet and the NDP are taking this opportunity to say, hey, this is the day that Justin Trudeau's meeting with Joe Biden. Here are the ways in which Joe Biden, at least in the NDP's eyes, is supporting Americans better than Justin Trudeau is supporting Canadians here in Canada. And the first reason he brought up was the minimum wage and how he wants to sort of push forward that agenda of increasing minimum wage and trying to do that to help support Canadians who are at that lower income level. The next thing that I thought was quite interesting that he brought up was the student loans portion. Now, there's been lots of talk in America about, I think, around $50,000 worth of student loans being canceled for certain students. Now, this is a far cry from what we have here in Canada, and it could be something that we could look at moving forward, right? Because that's a big problem right now for people who are just entering the workforce right now. There's so few jobs available for young Canadians. So what Jagmeet is calling for here is the NDP. They're pushing for the moratorium on student loan repayment. Right now, as of the Liberals' fall and economic update that was released, they proposed that they'd pause all interest on student loans at the federal level. So any federal loans that you've gotten, you wouldn't have to pay interest on. Again, that I don't believe that's been passed through the House of Commons yet, but so they're sort of in line with that. But Jagmeet's calling for a total pause, a moratorium on these student loans. We're going to listen into what else he has to say here. But thanks for hopping in, everyone in the chat. I'm seeing Nigel in here, Noel, Nigel's saying he should be on CP24 or CTV. That's funny. Thank you. We've got Ver in here, VS. I love seeing that member badge. It's awesome. Happy to hang out with you in here, Ver. Cup of coffee. We've got Susie. We've got Jerome, Nazir. Yeah, let me know in the chat. How's it going? I love to take a look at the chat and chat with you guys, answer any questions. We can just hang out and go over some things today. All right. So let's get going on this announcement from Jagmeet Singh, and let's see what else he has to say.
Has enlisted the aid of the military and deployed over 1,000 troops to help in the vaccine rollout and the actual vaccination process, supporting the efforts of states. We've called for, similarly at the federal level, we need an all hands on deck approach. So a lot of the things that President Biden are committing to do are things that we want Justin Trudeau to do. And finally, with the concerns raised around the Buy American initiative in the States and how that would deeply impact Canada, we're proposing that there should be a modification, an exception for Canada, given the fact that our economies are so integrated. Products aren't just made in Canada or America. Often the very same product goes over the border a couple of times, and products come from both America and Canada to produce the final end product. So we need to continue to say, there needs to be an exception for Canada, given our economy's integration, perhaps a North American clause instead, but certainly not one that excludes Canadians, which is going to deeply impact Canadian and American manufacturers who rely on each other. And finally, I think there's a role that can be played working together in this meeting, I hope, to address the issue of steel dumping. We know that Chinese steel continues to be dumped.
Okay, so they've covered a couple things there. And let's talk about it a bit. We're not going to touch so much on the vaccine rollout. That's not really what this channel is about as much. You can watch the nightly news if you want a full hour's worth of content on that. It seems like that's all people talk about. But the interesting thing they're talking about here is the modification for Buy America. Now, you've seen since Joe Biden's been elected all of this rhetoric saying, hey, we need to enforce Buy America policies. Now, the Liberal government in Canada here doesn't think that this is a huge deal. Because of the assurances they've gotten from Joe Biden and his team that Canadians won't be heavily affected by this economically. Now, whether or not that's true remains to be seen. Of course, we've seen huge economic problems with Line 5 and with the Keystone XL pipeline, big issues with this new president coming in and how that affects Canadians here and our economy and our ability to continue to support Canadians. Seeing more people in the chat, thank you so much for coming in here and hanging out, everybody. We've got Decker in here, a great longtime subscriber, One World Music, Pamela, Mary C, Tharson. I love hanging out with you guys. Let me know where you're from in the chat. That's sort of thing we do here. We like to try to go for every live stream, trying to get representation from every single province in the country. I think that's pretty cool, as well as territories. We've had a couple people from the territories as well, which is pretty darn cool, if I do say so myself. We've got a comment here from One World saying, as the Liberals are a minority government, they simply have to get the cooperation of the NDP at least. Yeah, that's true. I believe that's true. With any minority government, of course, they can't pass bills without the support from other parties, right? Because they need to get a majority vote. So yeah, if they can get support from the NDP on some of these issues, especially EI, they should be able to get this to pass through. But that's what we're going to see over the next couple of weeks if this is something that actually happens. and what that actually means for Canadians. Seeing other comments in here, we've got Tremaine saying, why don't they decrease the ridiculous price of schooling so people don't rack up a big debt to be certified, and so it will be possible for people to change careers easier? You know, Tremaine, I think that's a great idea. Well, I think that we also need to take a closer look at education and how it's marketed to our youth, right? Because the reality is going to school and getting a job and getting a bachelor's degree doesn't guarantee you a job like it used to. And at the very same time as that fact becoming true, we have this huge increase in tuition prices. And we've also seen this huge issue with the way that tuition has stayed the same for all of these institutions, even though they're only doing online learning that in many people's opinions is of a far less quality, because you have these older teachers who don't know how to work the technology, don't know how to plan their classes for this sort of tech. So students are paying more and getting less from school. So if we could lower the costs for education somehow, that would be beneficial. But the tricky thing is, these schools are run as businesses, right? Most aren't largely publicly funded. They're trying to make money from students. And I think that's something that's not talked about enough in the high school area when people are starting to choose what they do to go forward in school, is that, hey, these people are like, they are great educational institutions. They make our country better. But at the end of the day, it's about the dollar bills. That's what it's about. Seeing everyone here. Thanks so much for hanging out, you guys. Awesome show, by the way. Thanks, Tremaine. Decker's in here. Ashif, Jacal, yeah, let's go UBI. That's something that the Green Party actually just did a round table on. They seem to be the most in support of this program, but they're not calling it UBI. I think they're calling it basic livable wage or something like this. I think that they're sort of scared to use UBI because that's such a trigger word for a lot of people who aren't in support of that measure. All right, let's hop back in here and see what else he has to say. We're going to sort of skip over the topics that aren't as relevant to what we try to do here on the channel. Let's see what he's talking about. Okay. You guys get an inside scoop on how I get all this footage.
C'est essentiel pour les étudiants.
Again, my French isn't up to snuff, so
donc,
we'll skip over.
Aux États-Unis, communauté, the Senate absence, and for a very specific reason.
Let's see what he's talking about here. Oh, there
Just
are questions. Okay.
On that question, they're asking for in English. So no, we're not going to support the amendments, the Senate amendments, and for a very specific reason. First of all, the Senate is unelected, unaccountable, and what they've done in this case is they've tried to redo the work of the elected officials. The Senate absolutely has a role to play, perhaps in correcting a mistake and minor adjustments, but not to redo the work of elected officials. They're not accountable. Elected officials are accountable to Canadians, and the work done by Canadians should continue. In addition, the disability community has raised a lot of concerns that they don't feel like they've been listened to. So we are certainly not going to accept changes brought in by the Senate when they absolutely did not listen to the concerns of people in the disability community. This is a very difficult file to manage, and there's a lot of difficult decisions to be made. And they certainly should not be, these powers should not be massively expanded by the Senate. They should remain the work of the elected officials.
Okay, interesting. So lots of talk there on the role of the Senate in Canada versus and what they should be allowed to do and alter versus the elected officials. I think what he was saying there makes a lot of sense, and most people would likely agree that the people making the decisions and making the changes to policy should be the ones that are actually accountable to us as citizens. All right, seeing more people in the chat. Thank you so much for hanging out. One World says, a great idea would be to reduce interest rates on credit card balances, as many Canadians are heavily indebted and the banks continue to apply these ridiculous rates of 22 to 23%. Yeah, it's interesting because as soon as you get using a credit card, as long as you're using it in the correct way, they're not so dangerous. But the problem is people aren't educated on the way to use them, right? I always like to pay off the balance every single month in full, so you're not paying any interest. And if you can do that for a while with a credit card, you can get a personal line of credit, which is a far lower interest rate, probably around the 5% level these days. So, and that's where you can sort of actually use this credit to do things that you need to do in your life, rather than a credit card, which should sort of be more transactional and used as a tool to build your credit score. If you haven't checked out the video I made a little while back, I went over some of my top tips on how to use credit hacks to save thousands of dollars over the course of your life. And if you follow that video, you definitely will save a ton of money over the long term. Just check out my channel and go to credit hacks and it'll be the first one to come up. But that's interesting. All right, let's see what other questions he gets into.
Protectionnisme-là, le Buy American, c'est un donnant. Donc, vous donnez...
Et peut-être avec les tarifs pour
Confilion, TVA.
on a des alliés et on doit travailler ensemble. C'est essentiel. Un enjeu important impact sur aux États-Unis à cause des
Donc, faire tout ce qu'on peut, ça veut dire que vous souhaitez que monsieur...
essentiel qu'on travaille ensemble. C'est
So much
Canadian
information.
press.
Okay.
Good morning.
Canada and the US are some of the only countries who declared the China's treatment of the Uyghurs as genocide. What next steps that these two countries should do to stop China and to help each
Okay,
other?
that's some interesting political policy that's going into place right now. I'm not going to speak too much on it, but that's how Canada and the U.S. is going to handle China and some of the ethical problems that are going on there. That's something that they're expected to talk about today in their meeting.
Globally to donc pour protéger
For the answer, you spoke about that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau should demand that the U.S. and Canada work together to stop steel dumping in.
Okay.
the impact that economies are so uniquely.
I'm trying to cover the topics that are most particular to you and affect your life most directly, most immediately. That's why you see me sort of scanning around here on the bar, because I know that not everybody's interested in every single topic that's going on politically. So I try to just hone in on the ones that I think will be most impactful for you. All right. We're seeing more people in the chat. Thanks for joining, everyone. We got Gurkha, Marquis, Decker, Wilfred Dale, and everyone just hanging out. I love seeing you in here. I have a lot of fun doing these live streams and just talking about anything that you are interested in, specifically related to Canadians and in a lot of cases, their money. We like to talk about stocks here, real estate, cryptocurrency more and more. That's something I'm getting interested in, as well as what's going on in Canada in general when it comes to benefits and the way that Canadian politicians are spending our money, and if that's being done in the most efficient way, and topics like that. So if you have any questions or anything about those topics, once we get through this press conference, we'll go into a little bit of Q&A and get a little bit of discussion going, and you can get my takes on those things. All right.
Any comparison with Trump would put any
Margaret Thatcher when you see news.
Morning. Called for many things that I think we can work towards. Biden is already doing on an all Biden has already committed that's fought for. The second thing, so in addition to protecting workers and Canadians, I think there's an incredible opportunity for Justin Trudeau to follow suit with many things that President Biden has already committed to doing, and we're hoping that he does that. The moratorium on student debt, on making sure the minimum wage is increased, on an all-hands-on-deck approach to the vaccination. These are things that we've called for, as New Democrats, we've called for. President Biden is already doing or committing to do, and we're asking Justin Trudeau to follow suit. But there's a host of things, fighting the vaccine together, making sure we protect workers, working towards fighting the climate crisis at the same time while we create good jobs. There's many things that I think we can work together on.
Interesting.
Good morning, Mr. Singh. David Thornton from CBC News.
Morning.
Just kind of was listening to your preamble. Biden is implementing a lot of the things that you've called on Trudeau to do.
This is the main
I've
topic
heard
of
it
this
said
talk.
that Trudeau alongside Biden makes Trudeau look like Margaret Thatcher when you kind of put them together. In fact, a columnist at the Hill Times said that. It sounds like you're saying the same thing. Do you agree with that?
Well, certainly up until this point, to be honest, Justin Trudeau is getting a bit of a pass because any comparison with Trump would put any other alternative seem a lot better. So with the comparison of Trump, it was easy to look good. But now you've got someone who's doing a lot of the things that should be done, like a moratorium on student debt. Why has this government waited so long? Like, we passed that motion in Parliament. We said it should happen. Everyone agreed it should happen. We had a moratorium before. Why is this Liberal government choosing? It's a choice to say, well, students, we're not going to put that moratorium back in place. It's not like things have gotten better for students. The jobs numbers are making it clear it's even worse than before for students. It's hard for young people to get a job. So why not put a moratorium so students don't have to pay back their student debt while we're in this pandemic? And then we got President Biden, who's already committed to doing that. They're already moving on things that we've long called for here and fought for, and it doesn't make sense. The minimum wage, we've long said that this should happen. Initially, the Liberals said, no, it doesn't make sense. And now they've committed to it in their last campaign, and they still haven't done it. Again and again, we're seeing that Justin Trudeau was signaling some things that seemed that would help people, but hasn't followed through on them. And then quickly, President Biden has actually been elected and now moving forward on many of those same commitments and just actually getting them done. So it shows the contrast. One thing is to campaign on it, commit to it, and get it done. And that's what Biden is doing. And Justin Trudeau has said he would do it and then has let people down and let students down, let young people down, let people down again and again. And it's just wrong. And now we've got an example of someone who's showing them, well, it doesn't have to be that way. And we've always said that it doesn't have to be that way here.
That's an interesting critique of the current prime minister. Let's dig into that a little bit. I find that quite interesting. The point that Jagmeet is making here in the NDP and the position they're taking is that, hey, over the past 4 years with Trump as president, at least in the NDP's eyes, that gives Canadians an extremely low bar to be set in terms of these socially and economically liberal perspectives, right? They're saying because Trump was president for the past 4 years, Trudeau didn't have to do a lot to look good to his base and to Canadians as a whole. And now that we have Joe Biden in as the president, things are starting to change. You're seeing Biden come in and actually implement policies that the NDP have supported for a long time. Now that puts pressure on Justin Trudeau because all of a sudden the bar to which we're comparing ourselves is a lot higher, at least in this liberal perspective, right? Where they sort of look up to these qualities and these policies that are being put in place by Joe Biden. So, of course, the NDP that's a party that benefits greatly from this president actually taking these steps, moving forward on things like increases to minimum wage and these student loan moratorium, right? We saw that the Liberal government already has the capacity to pause these student loans for people, and when you pause those student loans, it essentially gives people room to breathe, right? We've seen many students moving back home with their parents in order to save money, which I think is a great idea, even if we weren't in a difficult time economically and in terms of the job market. But it's so challenging out there for students to get jobs, and I tend to agree with this idea, at least maybe not with canceling student debt, because that's something that's been proposed and something that Biden has been looking into, but certainly with at least a little bit more of a freeze, because all of these other Canadians who are on the CRB and EI, they're all receiving these extensions on the support that's given to them. Now, students haven't received the same thing. At the beginning of the pandemic, there was the Canada Emergency Student Benefit. Now, this was something that gave out some money to students who qualified, but there are many students that now that has ended, they're not able to qualify for the CRB. They were going to school, so they didn't make $5,000 in income. And now that they've graduated, they're going into the worst job market that we've seen in a very long time in Canada. And the interesting thing about the job market right now is that there's a huge spike in unemployment in the younger age groups, and then it sort of levels off over time. So when people like Pierre Poilievre comment on the unemployment rate and how it's so high in Canada, it's actually even higher than this extremely high number that we have in Canada for that specific age group. So the fact that there hasn't been support for them is really... It really makes you a little bit confused given the policy positions that have been taken up over the past while. Well, let's take a pause here and take a look at the chat. I think you guys can see this if I zoom in here. If you're in here and watching the stream and hanging out and haven't said hi in the chat, I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you haven't already done so, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And that helps get this stream out to more people who could be interested in this sort of stuff, and it helps support more Canadian content right here on the YouTube platform. So I'd appreciate that. Drop me a comment here. We're going to take a look at what's going on here. All right, there's lots of things going on. We've got Decker saying, okay, so a little bit of a discussion going on in here. All right. Yeah, there's lots of issues going on. Marquis bringing up some points and people sort of discussing that. There's lots going on here in the chat. So if you want to be a part of it, feel free to join in there. Let me know what you think about these things, and we can hop back into this press conference from Jagmeet, and then we can see if there's anything else that we expect to see coming down the pipeline in terms of news or information that we can take a look at together and sort of get a better idea of what's actually going on. All right, let's see. again, we just came off this question that was answered saying, hey, Trudeau's got to do more because now he's not comparing himself against Trump, he's comparing himself against Joe Biden.
I didn't give you the Margaret Thatcher.
Well, you feel free to give it if you want to. But okay, let me ask you about MAID. I've heard it said among people in the Senate that a lot of the issues that the Quebec court have brought up with the old MAID legislation.
Okay, I'm not entirely familiar with this. I'm going to do research on this topic, and we'll touch on it when I can provide a better perspective.
The work's been done. That's then completely redone by unelected people. They can vote again. Trudeau a écouté tous les experts. Caucus is completely united around the principle of protection. Pardonnez-moi, ils ont demandé the bill on gun control works. So maintenant,
we're sort of more focused here on the channel about economic issues, Canadians and their money, how they can sort of support themselves going forward. One of the things that I'm most interested in is the way that the wealth gap is being spread across here in Canada. Now, for people over the course of the pandemic who have invested in real estate and stocks and things I talk about here and how to do on the channel, they've done really well over the course of the pandemic for reasons that I'm actually going to explain in a video that should be coming out tonight. It's a lot about what I'm calling the Canadian money printer. And if you don't know how this system works and how there's new money being created every single day and thrown into the Canadian system and how that's benefiting people who hold these assets like real estate and stocks, you're going to want to catch that video later tonight. So hit the notification bell so you can check that out when it comes up. But these are the topics that we want to hone in on here in these live streams. Things that have to do with the Canadian economy, Canadians and their money, benefits and supports that we can see coming down the pipeline. That's what we're focusing in on. So if you're curious as to why I'm skipping over certain topics, that would be your answer.
Ils vont avoir
du Sénat.
Du Sénat. Oui, peut-être il peut soulever.
Okay, so it seems like that's the end of or rather, is this live? Okay, yeah, the live event is now over. Okay, so some interesting takes all in all from Jagmeet there. Not a lot of straight up policy, right? You can see why I started this live stream, because when you see a headline like this, let me bring up, I can't type today. Let me bring up my my thing where I can draw on the screen a little bit. All right. Yes, here we go. Yeah, when you see something like this, like NDP leader discusses COVID-19 aid, you think there's going to be more about the benefits and the major programs that have actually come down the pipeline from the government. But the main points we heard from this press conference instead were questions of why isn't Canada bringing in minimum wage of $15 more quickly, more rapidly? How come there isn't a student moratorium for loan repayment? Already on the federal level, we're seeing interest paused on these loans, but of course that's the federal level. Most student loans are on a provincial level, or many are, right? If you're in Ontario like I am and went to school in Ontario like I did, you'd be familiar with the OSAP system, which is how many people get their loans, and that's specifically for Ontario. So there haven't been any sort of moratoriums or pauses on those loans. So that's interesting that he focused on that when this was sort of billed to be a COVID-19 aid press conference. And of course, he compared Joe Biden to Trudeau and how it seems like he's doing more for Americans than Trudeau is doing for Canadians right now. Of course, with these live streams, I want to emphasize this. It's never my goal to try to bring in any bias or any leaning to any side. I try my best to sort of distill all this information, present it for you to take a look at, maybe give you some perspectives, and then allow you to make your mind up about what's actually going on here and how you personally feel about it. I really hope that I don't ever come across as having some political bias. Of course, every person does, but I try to sort of keep that to myself when I'm talking about these things, so that you can make up your mind for yourself. Because ultimately, who am I? I'm just a guy here on the internet. But if I can provide you with the information you need to make a rational decision, a logical decision about the way you feel about these things and how you're going to support certain politicians or others, then that's my goal here. We're going to take a quick look at the chat here, see what's going on. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. I love doing these live streams and hanging out with you. More to come in the future. All right. So we've got some comments here. All right. Jane the Canadian Me says, I'm a member of the government of Canada. We need universal basic income. That's a lot of people are supporting that. There could be issues with how we're able to fund this and how that would work. It seems like it might be challenging to fund the entire program on tax dollars, which is how most people see the traditional the model of how governments pay for things. So it could be difficult to get support on a broad level about that. But it's certainly an idea that's getting more and more popular in the country. Yeah, Wilfred says, we need to cut high education costs and make it free, from the 5th to 15th centuries. From MR Key. Thanks for hanging out, you guys. I always enjoy hopping in here and talking about a lot of things. So there's a couple other things going on right now. Let me see if there's any other live streams here on that same channel where we can watch live announcements from different politicians. Okay. Yeah, so nothing new here on this front. Feel free to let me know if we don't come up on anything else that's that would be interesting for this live stream news-wise as it breaks. Then we'll sort of transition into a question and answer period here with the chat. And if you have any questions specifically about the things that I have at least some insight on, real estate, stocks, investing, as well as these benefits. If you have any benefit-related questions, whether or not you think EI is going to pass through the House of Commons, these changes, let me know what you're curious about, and let me know where you're from, and we'll just keep on hanging out here for a little while. All right. We've got some questions here in the chat. VS says, average students are discouraged from getting more education because of the high costs, being punished for trying to get ahead. Yeah, well, I mean, like it's an issue, right? I think young people need to think more critically these days about whether or not it makes sense for them to go to school given what career they want to pursue, right? Like, there's so many fields in which you don't need the actual piece of paper degree in order to enter that field and start working. Now, of course, there are many jobs and many lines of work where you absolutely need to get the education and the formal education. You wouldn't want a doctor operating on you that didn't go through these processes, nor could you in Canada, right? But depending on what a student wants to do, I think they need to take a good, long, and hard look at whether or not it makes sense for them financially to go to school, right? We see people coming out of school, they go into their bachelor's degree, they complete their bachelor's degree, they leave the education system, can't get a job. They think, oh my goodness, I'm not educated enough. They go and get a master's, getting more student debt, and they come out of their master's still not able to get a job. Now they're sitting close to 80 grand in debt, maybe even more. And how do you dig yourself out of that hole with such a challenging job market right now? Yeah, I think people are being discouraged from going towards these, especially universities here in Canada that have such high tuition costs. When you can get a valid education at a college and sort of go into a trade, I think that's where a lot of people are going to start to go, because you go to where the money is, right? If you want to support yourself and build yourself up for a better future, people need to be thinking like that. All right, we have let's see if there's any more questions in here. Let me know, everyone. All right, some comments on EI and welfare. So it's okay. Decker's saying get rid of EI and welfare and go universal. Maybe we'll all have a chance. Yeah. As for the details of that program, I can't speak to how it would actually be implemented and whether or not it would work or not. There's some studies that show positive proof of a program like this working, and some that show the other side of things. So you really have to do your own research on that to get an idea of what's going on. All right. The Swagger King Baby says, do you think your post-secondary education was worth it? It depends on what you mean by worth it, right? I think you can get value out of things that's beyond what you expected to get from it. And let me explain what I mean when I say that. In terms of my career, going to school and going to university didn't advance me in my career very far with where I ended up, right? We see a lot of people finishing their degrees and pivoting. If you don't already know, I went to school in Toronto for music performance back in the day. And I went through and I performed professionally as a musician downtown Toronto, and paid my bills with that and teaching music. And it's something I'm still really passionate about and I still really enjoy. But the interesting thing is I got to this point where I'm like, you know, what's important to me is in the future being able to have a family and be able to support my family. And if I can work really hard in these next 10 years, I may be able to develop some sort of passive income through investments and be able to spend more time with my family and more time playing music in the future as well, right? So that's the way I tend to look at things. Was it worth it from a career perspective to go to university given the pivot I made afterwards? No. But was it worth it for me in all the learning experiences that I had and the friends that I made? Yeah, maybe. But I'm in the unique situation as well where I had some help in terms of getting me through education financially from very generous family members. And that's not something a lot of people can have. And I recognize how incredibly grateful I need to be for that. So I may have a different perspective on that if that wasn't the case for my situation. Really good question. Really good question. All right. I think I saw a question in here about how crypto is treating me today. Yeah, let me see if I can find that so I can call out. All right. The chat is going very quickly, and I love seeing you all in here. If you want to guarantee that I see it and I comment and I read on it, you can use the super chat function. That always works. But I want to touch on that crypto thing. Let me show you guys what's happening in the markets right now, cryptocurrency wise. If you were on the last stream, you'll know that I'm starting to get more and more interested in investing in cryptocurrencies because I'm understanding the benefits of it past just as a currency, right? The technology behind it and how blockchain works and how that could sort of eliminate the need for trust in our financial system. I'm starting to believe in that, especially given all the research and education I'm getting over the past month or so about how Canada's money system as a whole works. I'm starting to see the benefits. Okay, let's pull up. I'll show you guys my screen here. Let's pull up what's happening today. We've seen a challenging day to say the least when it comes to stocks and cryptocurrencies. It's been quite a day. Here's the day. We started off, if you're following Bitcoin, we started off at $68,000 Canadian for Bitcoin, and we reached a low of $56,000. That is a huge drop. And of course, that's one of the hallmarks of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is that it's just so incredibly volatile right now. You really need to have the stomach for holding this sort of stuff at this point. You need to have the psychology of investing where it doesn't feel bad when your investments go down because you're planning on holding things for the long term, right? That's what I always recommend. Never invest anything that you don't intend to have in the market for the long term. I'm a believer that over time, an aggregate of the market, like an index of the market, will go up over the years. That's what we've seen historically. But in terms of on the weekly or monthly or even yearly basis, you can have some major losses in investing. But I think if you have a long enough time horizon, just getting started and putting some money in the market today will benefit you long term if you hold it for long enough and you aren't forced to sell at lows. But yeah, we've seen quite a drop here in Bitcoin. It could be a buying opportunity. We could see future declines even past this, but there's been quite a run up. Like if we look at the max, this is 2018, 2020. At the beginning of 2020, so like when the pandemic started, we were sitting at around $11,000. Now I wasn't invested at this point. And as we go on, we see just over the past few months an absolutely incredibly high and unprecedented boom, right? Going up from $11,000, what we were looking at the beginning of the pandemic, all the way up to $70,000, peaking there. Then this is Canadian dollars. You often hear about it talked about in American dollars, right? People were freaking about it passing the $50,000 mark, and people in Canada looked at that as like, hey, we did that a while ago. No, they're talking in American dollars, and of course that's what it's showing me here in Canadian dollars. If we look at it in US dollars, you can get the idea of what those people are talking about. Yeah, so we've now dropped back down under $50,000, but it made it all the way almost to $60,000 American. So obviously a very volatile market. But the reason for why we've seen such a big spike here, lots of people speculate. Of course, there's major events like Tesla buying billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin to hold on their books as a company, as sort of a hedge against the growth or rather a hedge against the American dollar, right? It helps them to sort of diversify their holdings in their cash positions. But one reason that I've been interested in is what effect has the pandemic had on cryptocurrencies? And what has really happened here, in my eyes, is out of necessity, there's been so much more attention on digital currencies, digital transactions, and as a result, more people are having the time to look into cryptocurrency, and obviously the news has picked up these major spikes, and that just propels it further. And those are some sort of theories I have on why we've seen such incredible growth. Of course, I'm not an expert on this. Any decisions you make going forward about investing in this sort of stuff is this is a starting point, right? This is for entertainment purposes only. This is the legal jargon I have to go through every time I talk about this stuff. I'm sure you can understand why, but yeah, do some looking into it yourself. In the description, there's a couple links there and ways you can buy a cryptocurrency if you're interested in that, but again, that's totally up to you. Let's take a look at the chat here and see what's going on. Thank you for hanging out, you guys. Feel free to say hi in the chat. I love hanging out with you guys and seeing what's going on, seeing what you're thinking, seeing what you're talking about, and what you're interested in. That's so valuable to me. Yeah. All right, we've got, so One World says, I don't like cryptocurrencies because of high volatility not related to any real value. We need more stable cryptocurrencies attached to a basket of currencies and reserves. This is money, not a stock. Interesting. Yeah, I think people have that perspective, right? That buying Bitcoin is an investment, right? And that's why you see a lot of people piling into buying cryptocurrency with things like Wealthsimple crypto and with Robinhood, right, in the States. But when you buy this cryptocurrency, you don't actually own it, right? You just sort of own a derivative of it, because Wealthsimple is the one with the crypto. They're holding it. You can't take the crypto out and put it in in a separate wallet. They're sort of just holding it for you as an investment. Some people argue this is the wrong way to look at things, because they're trying. In a lot of people's mind, Bitcoin and these other digital currencies are looking to be just that, currencies, right? And used transactionally in the future. So it's interesting the different perspectives people have as they learn more and more about how they really view this. Is it an investment, or is it actually a usable currency? All right. Seeing more people in here. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. You've seen lots of new faces and lots of familiar faces. I love hanging out with you guys and seeing what's going on. All right. Okay. Awesome. It's so interesting to get into these discussions. You never know where these live streams are going to go and what's going to be most interested to you. Again, if you have any questions you want me to address here on the live stream, feel free to put that right question with a colon at the beginning of your comment so that I can sort of see it amongst the other chat messages so that I can get to answering it. Yeah, that's the best way to sort of get my attention in here. Decker saying, we're sitting at home, unemployed, sipping coffee, watching you. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope it'll pick up and people will be able to get jobs and get back to normal life relatively soon. I'm having a coffee with you right here. It's a black coffee for me. That's my go-to whenever I'm at home. If I'm hitting the drive-thru, I'll usually get a regular, but that's just a little bit of cream to cool it down so I can drink it as quickly as possible. I don't have time to wait for it to cool down. Come on. Who's got time for that? RM says, I use Wealthsimple. I bought $20 in Bitcoin. It started going down, so I sold them. Upside, I made $11. Hey, not too bad. Again, I like to invest for the long term and try to sort of not look at anything when the markets go down, because the intent is to hold long term and not use money that you need for other things. Yeah. All right. So if you're just joining the live stream late here, we went over at the beginning of the stream some new announcements from the NDP, and he sort of framed it like it was going to be an announcement, and especially in the way that this video was titled that we watched. But it ended up being sort of just calling out Justin Trudeau for not being as liberal thinking or as forward thinking in his policies as the now American president, Joe Biden, and all the policies that he's bringing in, and saying that, hey, when you compare to Donald Trump, Justin Trudeau looks very liberal and like he's pushing for those Canadian policies that are on that more liberal side. But now that there's a more liberal president, the bar has been raised in terms of those values that the NDP certainly value. All right. Dixie says, "Oh, Russell, have you changed your diet during the lockdown?" Not much. My diet goes up and down. The one thing I'm missing the most is working out during the lockdown. I used to go to the gym quite frequently, and you can't really do that. And now it's sort of starting to open up where I am, but you have to book it, and you have a huge giant gym, and you can only have 10 people inside. So it's kind of challenging right now. Yeah, to get the exercise you need, but I try to sort of eat as healthy as I can to make up for it. All right. Okay, and so you make some money in dividends. Yeah, that's another way that people go forward with investing, right? Investing in dividend stocks so that quarterly, usually quarterly, the companies will pay out some money from their profits to you, right? Usually around like 4%, depending on the stock that you're in. That's sort of the blue chip rate, like the big Canadian banks or Bell, right? They'll pay out some dividends close to that rate. Kainat says, any news for student loans? So the most recent news we have was back in the fall federal economic update that the finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, brought forward. She brought forward some ideas of pausing student loans, but only the interest on those loans and only at the federal level. So it's clearly not really supporting Canadians when you take into consideration that most loans are on the provincial level. So they haven't even paused the interest on that. So students are being forced to pay off their loans right now when it's more difficult than ever to get a job. So there's definitely some issues there with what's going on and some inequalities with who's been getting support. Right, we've seen people be able to get these extensions on the CRB, the CERB, the CRCB. There's so many acronyms, man, oh man. But that's the interesting thing, is that it seems like students are sort of getting the short stick in the situation. Can't go and get a job or it's more difficult to go get a job, but also they have this huge debt from going through the schooling system and paying so much to get their university degrees. So it's such a challenging time, and not everybody can move home with mom and dad. Not everybody has the relationship where they can, and not everybody has a mom and dad around to be able to go and do that. So it's definitely not equal in terms of support. So Jagmeet here, Kainat, since you're asking, Jagmeet is saying, hey, we're calling for a federal, a countrywide pause on student loan repayment, not wiping out the debt, but pausing it. Now, whether or not that will get talked about, sometimes there's these press conferences where they just try to get out their ideas to the public, but it doesn't make any headway in terms of the government unless they get a lot of support and a lot of pushback from other politicians during things like question period, which we cover here on the channel, and during the debates in the House of Commons. If there's a lot of pressure put on the Liberals, this could be more likely, but we haven't seen that as of yet. So make of that what you will. I hope that answers your question. Question One World says, question, how about online jobs? There's too much talk, but what are the jobs and where are they? You need to launch a series on online jobs and trends after onslaught of COVID. Yeah, so you're right. People talk, hey, more jobs are moving online, but for a lot of people it's difficult to access these types of jobs, right? There's one job that I did for a while called VIP Kid, where you're teaching people how to speak English online, and sort of like a tutoring job like that. That's what I was doing a little bit to make ends meet when I was back in the music industry. And of course, the money's up and down when you're a full-time musician, like I was years ago before getting my real estate license and sort of pivoting careers almost entirely. Yeah, but the online jobs, they're not evident and they're not very clear to find. And it could be challenging to get one. I know that job that I had, I was only able to get because I had a bachelor's degree in something. That was one of the requirements. So yeah, I think that could be something that's interesting, trying to go in and like the best online jobs for people to get. And maybe that's something I can cover here on the channel. Let me know in the chat if that's something you'd be interested in. And of course, if you're just joining the stream, you can feel free to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. I'm thinking if you're here, you probably subscribed, watched a couple of my videos before, and I appreciate you hanging out and chatting with me. I just figured I'd come on here for maybe about an hour and chat with you, answer some questions, and go over that news conference that we just saw. I want to double check to make sure there's no other announcements going on, because sometimes they'll just spring them on us. Okay. Nothing major that I think needs to be covered here as we're talking. So we'll do a little bit more Q&A, and then we'll call the stream there. Yeah, thanks for hanging out, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed hanging out. We'll cover a couple more things here. I think I saw some info on, or a question on, housing market. Yeah, Sweet Vanilla says the houses are becoming so expensive. Yes, you're absolutely right. And there's a video coming out tonight on my channel. I'm going to film it after this live stream and hopefully release it tonight. But it's about the inner workings of what's actually going on, why we're seeing real estate prices balloon, and also how it seems that money can be created out of thin air these days, and how that system works and why that's happening, how it's happening. And hopefully I'll be able to explain it in a simple enough way that most people will be able to understand, because when it comes to this sort of monetary policy, it can be a pretty dry subject that a lot of people won't listen in on, right? So I did a bunch of research on this and what's actually happening, how money's being created, and how that money might not be going to the right people. And how that's something that needs to be debated. That's something that's coming out on the channel tonight. So if you're interested in learning more about that, make sure to check back then and hit the notification bell and all that so you can know that that video is coming out. Hey, I'm seeing Shane in here. How's it going, Shane? Good to hear from you, buddy. Really enjoy hanging out and learning a little in these live streams. Yeah, I really enjoy having them, and having support from people like you and all the regulars in here that I'm seeing. I'm hoping that more and more into the future we can make this more of a regular thing. Of course, when there's major news, I want to do some of these live streams, but also occasionally I want to be able to have a slower pace like this where we can sort of chat and talk about a whole bunch of different issues. We talked about crypto today. We talked about student loans. Not as much talk about the CRB, CRSB that we normally talk about here. But I like how we can sort of move around and talk about different topics. And nice to see you in here, Shane. All right. Hammer and an Anvil says, hey, Russell, I see everyone in chat always talking about UBI, but has Trudeau ever mentioned it? That's a good question. He may have mentioned it. I haven't seen absolutely every piece of footage. He may have mentioned it. He may have talked on it in the past, but it certainly isn't a major point of his platform as a politician, and it's certainly not something he's pushing for. When we've seen the CRB, CRCB, CRSB, the CERB, this was like a giant experiment in direct supports to major amounts of Canadians, a huge amount of Canadians, and spending billions and billions of dollars to do so. Now, we don't have the results of that experiment yet, right? We don't know where things are leading. We don't know what's going to come of this because the consequences of doing these things trails so much, right? So I think a lot of people are going to be looking to the future to get an idea of what a major program like this would look like and do. Certainly Justin Trudeau has said many times, and also Chrystia Freeland, who's the Minister of Finance, who manages things like this, have said these supports are time limited. They're not going to go forever. That's what they've been saying in the House of Commons. That's what they've been saying in their press conferences. So you can certainly agree that their policy does not reflect the implementation of a UBI. Now, some people will say that they're leading us that way. That's to be debated. There was a talk that the Green Party did. I believe the Green Party is the most in support of a system like this. Because of the amount of press they've sort of tried to create around the idea. If you want to later on YouTube, go to CPAC and just in the most recent videos, the Green Party did a round table discussing evidence that they believe shows that this could be a positive program, and it seems like that would be part of their platform. But of course, the Green Party hasn't had much success in recent years in terms of having an impact majorly on the political environment in Canada here. But that's a good question. Yeah. Wilfred, thanks for hanging in here. I'm glad you love the videos. Yeah. All right. Tremaine says ETFs versus dividends. Interesting. It certainly is two different perspectives, right? Let me explain what these are for anybody who doesn't know. Hopefully we can get educational in here a little bit. I hope it doesn't show up backwards for you. Yeah, okay, that'll be good. Yeah, so we've got ETF. Oh, let me actually do this. I think this will be a little easier to write on. I've got this in here, my messy whiteboard. So ETFs versus dividends. For those who don't know, these are two different things that you can invest in, right? We like to sort of touch on topics like this. Let me show you the difference. We've got and you'll have to excuse my childish handwriting, ETFs, and we'll do over here dividends. So ETFs, basically what you're investing in when you invest in an ETF is a bunch of different stocks, right? You can think of it like we'll call it like a little, here's a basket, here's the handle on the basket. You definitely can't tell that's what that is. Again, I am not an artist. I play music, but I do not draw. So here's a basket. An ETF is a bunch of different stocks. What an ETF does is it puts a bunch of different stocks into a basket. When you buy an ETF or an exchange traded fund, you're buying all of the stocks inside of this basket. Now, what this allows you to do is it allows you to get a broader investment in the entire market rather than buying one specific stock. When you buy one specific stock, you run the risk of that stock performing poorly, going down and losing money on it in the short term, right? Or even the company going bankrupt, you lose all your money. That doesn't happen as frequently with some of the more safe company investments, but it is a risk. When you invest in an ETF, you're essentially investing in every single company that is inside that basket. There are different types of ETFs given how much risk you want in your portfolio. Like if you want it to be mostly made up of high risk stocks that have potential to grow but also could go down. But on the other side of things, you could get a safer one, maybe include some bonds, some GICs, some safe investments, as well as some equities. So equities just means stocks, of course. So that's what an ETF is. Now the difference, or this is ETFs versus dividends. Dividends is where a dividend is an amount of money that a share or a company will pay out to its investors in order to incentivize them to stay invested in the company. Companies like Bell here in Canada, or like CIBC, some of the telecoms companies or the banking companies. These are the types of companies that will pay out dividends. And so essentially what you're doing is you're buying the stock in an individual company. Say you buy Bell stock, that's BCE on the stock market. You buy Bell stock, let's just for example's sake, say you buy it for $100. Now, if Bell's dividend is 4%, which is where it's sort of hovered in that sort of area, then over the course of the year, if you buy that one Bell stock for $100, they're going to give you $4 over the course of the year, 4% of your initial investment. And they'll just give that to you. It'll go directly to your account. You'll usually receive it quarterly, like every 3 months. So 4 times across the year, you'll get $1 payments into your account. Now that may not seem like much, but once you have a large enough portfolio, people can actually live on the dividend income, right? If you increased this instead of $1,000 to $100,000, right? All of a sudden, making 4% on that is $4,000, right? And as this increases, you add another zero, you're making $40,000 a year, right? If you are able to invest $1 million, that's not how that would work. Like this, $1 million, you'd be making $40,000 a year on that $1 million at a 4% dividend. Of course, with this, you run the risk of that stock going up and down in value, and depending how you feel about that, it could be a little bit more risky. But there is your long answer. Hopefully that's helpful for you a little bit. But that's the difference between the two. If you were asking about my opinion, you probably already know about it. I sort of like the idea of having two different minds at the same time when it comes to investing. Having a basket of safe, lower risk investments to ensure that no matter what happens, you're going to be able to survive in the world, right? And that could be a good place for ETFs, where likely it's not going to go up dramatically, but it's also not going to go down dramatically. Likely will go up a little bit over the long term. I like to have a basket of investments like that. On the other hand, because I'm young, I can sort of take more risks with my money and have another basket where I may pick individual stocks that I think are going to perform. Now, I might be totally wrong on those stocks and I could lose a bunch of money there, but because I'm so young, I have the ability to sort of make up these losses over time, and I can sort of take more risks now that could pay off for me big time in the future. So if you have those two basket mentalities, I like to have ETFs in one basket, a little bit more safe, and then maybe some direct stocks, maybe some dividend stocks in that more risky basket. So that's my perspective on that. And we can do more things like that here on the channel if you're interested in sort of talking about those things. All right. Ver says, VS, I like seeing that badge. I can see your name so clearly with that red. After doing some research into buying crypto, when I finally decided to give it a try and buy some, my transaction failed to get through right after Elon bought. Huh, that's interesting. I wonder what platform you were buying through. Usually it's a pretty seamless process. All right. Musicians draw sounds. Yeah. All right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why I can't draw. It's because I can only draw sounds into the air when I'm playing music, when I do that. All right. Heather says there should be a cap on how much a person can own in a lifespan, not hoard to the point where there's nothing left for anyone else, including the animal population. Interesting perspective. Yeah. Thank you. So dividends would be better for passive income, and ETFs are more of a safer approach. Money in the bank and investing in both is best. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Now, I mean, like, I'm not an expert on all of this, right? Like, I don't profess to have any more knowledge than the next guy when it comes to this, but it's something I've been interested in a while, so you can hear my perspectives on it a little bit. I like the perspective of having a safe amount of investments, right? Some lower risk things like ETFs, maybe some lower risk ETFs in that basket, and then depending on how old you are, having more or less risk in another more risky basket that can sort of, even if you lose all of that money, you're still going to be okay because you have the safe basket. Yeah. VS says Lumina. I don't have experience with Lumina for buying cryptocurrencies, but that's odd that it didn't go through for you. I recommend trying again and get a little bit of information there. Coinbase is good for crypto. Yeah, that's true. I like to use BitBuy here in Canada. It's rather easy. Some pretty high fees for some things, like in terms of deposits, you have to pay a percentage there. But yeah, if you're just joining the stream, we've gotten a little bit off topic. We were talking about the NDP's plan for benefits and for the changes to what they're going to support moving forward. We saw them push for things like student loans being paused for the long term, an increased minimum wage. These are the main comparisons that were made, but we got a little bit off topic here as we've done some Q&A here. And I think we're just about ready to wind down the stream here. I'll hop back on here again if there's anything interesting that I think could come your way, and I'll try to sort of break that down for you. I'll give you a couple more minutes if you have any more questions before we wind things down, and then we'll sort of wind things down here. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I love doing these live streams. I think it's so cool. We've got 150 people hanging out here watching, talking about some things that at least I find interesting. So I always have a blast doing it. Here's hoping for more and more of them in the future. Okay. Is there any ODSP news? None that I know of. Apologies, Arama. UBI, we've talked about that a little bit, the free agents, but it could be difficult to get the broad-based support that you would need in order to actually pass that policy. Lots of people have very strong emotions tied to that phrase UBI, and a lot of people are really passionate about how this policy could help people. A lot of people on the other side are very against it and think we don't have the money to pay for things like this. How so, Dan? So eventually the ETFs will kill themselves off in fees? Oh, I wonder what you're taking a look at. But I think ETFs are a little bit better than mutual funds and some higher fee rates on these other investments. But we can get more into that on another video. I definitely recommend investing in ETFs if you're going to invest in any sort of fund. Mutual funds tend to have such high percentages of management fees. Yeah. Decker says, don't worry, Russell, we're stuck inside. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, well, thank you so much for hanging out. One more question. Nancy says, are we able to borrow from an RRSP account somehow without penalties? In certain situations, yes. If you're a first-time home buyer, there is a RRSP withdrawal program where you can take that money out. But otherwise, if you take money out of an RRSP, you're going to have to pay taxes on that like it was income this year. You're gonna have to treat it like income. So that's the interesting point. There's gonna be more talk about taxes on this channel as we get closer to that. I actually partnered with a company that we're going to be talking about free software that they have. In a lot of cases, people can file their taxes on there. So we're gonna talk about that in a future video, along with some tips that I think could be helpful for you this season. Yeah, everyone, thanks for hopping in here. If you haven't already done so, make sure to like this video, share it with anybody next time you see that we're live, subscribe and hit the notification bell. I love sort of growing this YouTube channel and hanging out and creating this community where we can hang out all together. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a great day. Bye. Oh, I got to do this. I'll see you next time. That's important.